Before I start speaking, Chair, I need to declare some interests. So firstly, I am a trustee of Friends of Barham Library, which occupies Unit 4 in Barham Park. I'm also a trustee of a recently formed charity called Friends of Barham Park. I also have close association with Barham Veterans Club because I help them to get some grants, and Tamu Samaj, another organization occupying premises in Barham Park, who I also assisted in obtaining grants. I've been advised by the solicitor to the council that I'm permitted to make a presentation today, but that I should withdraw after I've done it, which I will do. And I hope that other councillors who have a similar interest to mine do so too. Finally, in relation to one of the items which deals with a company mentioned in the reports that is associated with George Irvin, I should say that I have been lobbied by Mr. Irvin a number of times in the past in relation to his planning applications and the covenant. And on each occasion, I told him that I, one, couldn't support his planning application, and two, I could not support the withdrawal of the covenant, which was put in for a particular reason. I believe, and I would expect, that once I cease to be both leader of the council and cease to be a councillor for Sudbury for a while, Mr. Irvin approached other councillors, some of whom may be present here, and may need to consider whether they need to declare a similar interest and withdraw. I'm now ready to address the issues relating to the call-in. Thank you. So we have, together with my colleagues, called decisions of the Trust Committee on 8 different grounds, 2 relating to the strategic report and 6 in relation to the operational ones. So the first item that we called in related to the property review, because we felt strongly that the advice given to the trustee was inadequate and that the trustees were not provided with the information that they had asked for a year before. There was no business plan, there was no budget, there was no indication how the proposals would be delivered. The trustees were advised that vacant possession of the various units could not be obtained until 2031, and therefore effectively deferred the proposals until 2031. There was in the report reference to the Children's Centre and the risk of a clawback of a grant that was obtained for that Children's Centre. The officers seem to have failed to notice and advise the trustees that the risk of that clawback doesn't expire until 2034. So it's a bit inexplicable as to why it was felt that 31 was the year in which the project could start. The second item relates to the proposal to vary the charitable purpose of the charity. Now, this is very strongly opposed by local residents. The Trust Committee that met on the 10th of September did not permit any representations from local residents concerned about decisions that were taking place and being made in relation to the trust. This is besides the very clear guidance from the Charity Commission, which states that not only do councillors have particular and specific responsibilities when dealing with a charity, a council, which is effectively the trustee, has an extra responsibility to ensure that it properly engages with members of the public and the local community. There has been no engagement. Decisions were made in 2023. There was no engagement for a year. And at the meeting on the 10th of September, the chair of the trust specifically denied interested parties the right to speak. If I can now turn to some of the issues related to the operational matters. One of them is about delegation of powers to officers. Well, I would argue very strongly that you have got plenty of evidence in front of you that the delegation to officers has failed. Officers across the council in finance, in property, and beyond have missed opportunities to generate income for the trust, failed to implement terms of leases in place, failed to deal with debt collection, failed to apply appropriate rates of interest, and I could go on. The call-in lists out all those failings. I think there is a need for a proper governance review of the trust. And until such time, no delegation should be authorized. Decisions should be made by the trustees, and they need to be aware of the implications of their decisions. There are then issues relating to various leases that have been allowed to expire. That has implications, as does the recovery of any rents, which were not properly advised on at the meeting on the 10th of September. Some of the advice was wrong, some of the advice was misleading, some of the advice was inadequate. For example, somewhere else in the report, there is a reference to issuing Section 25 notices. Section 25 notices are issued in relation to leases which are protected. The proposal by the officers to issue Section 25 notices, in most of the cases, related to leases which are not protected. How is it I know that and the officers of the council do not? I could go on.
I'm just going to ask you to wrap up now.
Well, can I just wrap up by saying we have identified areas, 8 areas, where decisions were made on the 10th of September, which are highly flawed. The meeting of the trust dealing with very complex issues took exactly 22 minutes. No third party looking at the report before the trustees would conclude that those decisions were properly taken and made in that limited amount of time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to turn to members of the committee and see what questions we have from members. Councillor, if you want to stay in your seat, we might have a few questions for you. Might not be done with you yet. Do any members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Giorgio?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few clarifying questions, Councillor Lorber. I'd like to know more about the year 2034. You mentioned just now that the trust would need to wait until 2034 before they could implement the architect's plans. Why is that the case?
In some 15 or so years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the council spent quite a bit of money and time investing in children's centres. The money invested came from Sure Start grant funding. Most of those centres that were built at the time were standalone centres costing somewhere in the region of £500,000 each. I was leader of the council at the time. I had knowledge of Barham Park Public Library at the time. We knew there was spare space in the building, and we decided that instead of spending £500,000, we could spend £200,000 to build a children's centre within the library, while at the same time improving facilities for the library, including, for example, providing a public toilets for the library and for users of the park. The grant is valid for 25 years. If a children's centre closes before that time, there is a risk that some of that grant could be clawed back. This council decided to restructure its children's centre provision a few years ago. The children's centre within Barham Library was closed possibly about 10 years ago. Initially, Bernardos were brought in to run in a comparable service, but they too moved out possibly 8 years ago. I hope people involved with Should Start are not listening at the moment, but the reality is there has been no effective children's centre in Barham Library for at least 8 years. If Should Start were on top of the situation, they would have initiated a clawback already. Throughout the process, officers of the council have been juggling things around or trying to give the impression that the children's centre still exists. An organization called Young Brent Foundation, who needed office space and provide coordinating activities, were put into Unit 8 a few years ago. They do not and have never provided what can be described as children's services. They provide support for youth services, but not children's services. The reality is, and the advice from the officers was, don't do anything until 2031 in relation to expired leases to avoid the clawback. But the reality is, if you act in 2031, there is still 3 years left. 2009 plus 25 years is 2034. I noticed it. I knew it. You can ask yourself why nobody else did.
Okay, Councillor Mitchell.
Is there precedent for Sure Start clawing back that funding elsewhere in the UK?
Well, that's not a question for me to answer. Throughout this process, and you can look at a number of Barham Park Trust report, officers of the council have highlighted that this is a real issue which they need to deal with and to manage, and that there is a serious risk that if the impression is given that the children's centre no longer exists, that the threat of a clawback is serious. What the officers, even at this late stage, can't tell us, according to the report that went to the trustees, as to whether that liability falls on the trust or whether it falls on the council. I don't know why we are not able to give that answer. In my view, the children's centre was brought in by the council. It's a council liability, i.e. Brent Council taxpayers, if action is taken, not the trust. But that is the position. Officers may be able to answer your question better than I can.
Councillor Long.
Yeah, I've got a question more specifically about the park, because it's not just about the buildings. And consultation always seems to be about the buildings. What facilities are there for the public in the park?
Well, over the last few years, as a result of particularly our involvement, there have been a number of improvements. So, for example, the Queen Elizabeth II Garden, which was established for the Silver Jubilee in 1977 and was somewhat run down, was renewed as a result of a ENSIL application, which we initiated originally, supported by the council officers, and which we supported with a required petition for it to be awarded. That garden has been improved and is quite extensively used as a result. It was Friends of Barham Library who made a successful bid for ENSIL to clear and repair the pond in the middle of the park. The park attracts a lot of people for casual walking, playing in open spaces and so on, but it is predominantly the organizations that occupy the various buildings who really make a very big contribution. So the Barham Veterans Club, for example, which has been around for 77 years, meets the objective, and that was its original objective when it was set up by Wembley Borough Council and Middlesex County Council, to tackle the issue of loneliness and isolation amongst older men. 77 years later, that is exactly what they are still providing. Tamu Samaj UK is a Gurkha organization, Nepalese. They run countless activities from their premises. They make it available for hire for other smaller groups who couldn't operate there. They celebrate, they run activities. If it wasn't for the Gurkhas, we wouldn't really have much of a parade on Remembrance Day. Friends of Barham Library, you name it, we do it. We are home to a memory lounge, people with dementia and their carers. We provide yoga. There is a Muslim prayer group who meet and have been meeting for the last 10 years and doing participating in their prayers. If somebody needs a hire for a class, we provide it. Walks for people, nature stuff. Friends of the Earth meet in our library at reduced rates, and so on. I could go on.
Follow-up question. It was about the park itself. I know there's a playground and I believe an outdoor gym.
Correct.
Are there any other leisure facilities apart from general exercise that people actually do in the park itself?
It is a park. It is an open space surrounded by residential areas. On a nice sunny day, the play area that you mentioned is overflowing with parents and young children, hundreds probably. The nearby field is full of people playing different sports, be it cricket, be it football, be it badminton, being whatever. If the large part of the field wasn't overgrown as part of the council's greening program, there would be loads more activities there. So on a good day, the park is full of people doing whatever they like doing, walking their dogs, going for a walk, going for a run. I taught my children to ride their bikes there. Other people do the same. It is a very popular, very much loved park. The fun fairs that take place twice a year are also popular, if somewhat expensive nowadays, but they are busy. So there is loads going on, and local people would miss what is going on. There is a lack of a toilet. Why is that? For the very simple reason that the toilet that we put in specifically for public use was leased by an administration that closed our library to the tenant that they specifically brought in, the same tenant that owes all the money, that keeps the doors closed and makes sure that Barham Park doesn't have a toilet, public toilet, paid for with public money. If that building was left to Barham Community Library, that toilet would be open and available to the public. Which toilet do you think people use when they need a toilet? Barham Community Library keeps its door open. We have a notice on the door that says for community library use only. Please ask if you need a toilet. Not once in the last 8 years have we refused somebody using our toilet. We provide the public service that the council has taken away.
And Councillor George, I'm going to take the last question from you, then we're going to move on to the next speaker.
Okay, I'd like to turn to, this is my last question. Okay, I'll do several.
But you can do the follow-up as well, don't
Yeah,
worry.
that's fine. I'd like to refer to, or go back to the 22-minute meeting where decisions were taken that we have, that have been called in today. I was quite shocked to hear that you weren't given the opportunity to speak at that meeting. I think you were right to comment that the Charity Commission encourage council trusts to engage with the public. You're a member of the public. You also helped to run one of the units. So did you wish to speak at that meeting? What would you have said? And if you were denied the opportunity to speak, were there any reasons given?
Well, the last bit is easy to answer. No, there were no reasons given, and there would not have been any valid reasons to give. We have attended meetings of the Barham Park Trust for many years. We want to positively engage. We occupy the premises. On a daily basis, we deal with issues. Only on, let me think, where is it? Only on Monday, no, Sunday, I tell a lie. Only on Sunday, Tamu Samaj had a rental of their premises. By accident, they let off the fire alarm. There is nobody around from the council or from anybody else to switch off that fire alarm. That event would have been destroyed had it not been, well, in this instance, me, who could assist in dealing with that issue. The whole point of us going to the trust meetings is to engage in communications. We are committed to Barham Park. Yes, I wear a number of hats. I'm a councillor and I know I can be a pain in the neck. That's fine, I accept that. But nobody can take away from the fact that I'm committed to Barham Park being properly looked after for the benefit of local people. Titus Barham, it is not common, it is quite unusual for people to be as generous as the Barhams were. They gave up their home and their gardens for the enjoyment of local people. I think we have collectively, we have a responsibility to uphold their wishes and to continue to provide what they wanted, which is as wide-ranging community use of all the facilities. That's what Barham veterans do. That's what Samaj do. That's what we as a community library do, and all the groups that we partner with, Dementia Lounge, yoga classes, all the groups that are involved and have an opportunity to use our community library are encouraged to provide as wide-ranging public service as they possibly can. That's
Okay.
what we live for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lorber. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to, a quick follow-up from you, Councillor Giorgio.
I mean, I don't think we've even scratched the surface, and I think I have further questions that I'd like to ask.
I'll let you do the follow-up, quick follow-up, but
It's not a
we
follow-up,
do
it's-
have
it's
other
a
we have a lot of speakers tonight and we haven't even got to the officers yet.
I mean, I
so
think it's
do
such an
appreciate
important
that.
issue that we need to give our speakers the ability to answer all our questions, and I have several, so.
I do appreciate that, but we've also got questions from other people that we will want to ask more than likely. But please do ask your follow-up quickly, but we do need to bear in mind the time.
Fine. Okay, thank you, Chair. I want to ask about the covenant that was put in place. I think that you have a good understanding of why that was put in place in the first place. So can I ask when that was put in place and why it was put in place?
Barham Park is held in trust. It's endowed land, basically. But for many, many years, the council forgot that was the case. So it did a lot of things which they did as a council rather than a responsible body responsible for a charity. One of the things they did was to build 2 cottages in the park. Those became somewhat neglected over the years, not used for their intended purpose, which was for staff who were doing work in the park. And a decision was made, probably about 15 years ago, that they should be sold. The intent was always to ensure that they were sold as is and that they would never be enlarged or the site would be redeveloped for additional housing. The logic was, we don't have the money to repair them, we will sell them and we will reinvest the money in the park. The initial sale attempt failed and they were eventually put up for auction. But the council decided that the prospective purchasers would be told very clearly what the limitations of the sale are. You are buying 2 old cottages, by that time, whatever it is, 50 odd years old. You will be able to renovate and repair them, but we will put in place a legal document, a covenant, which prevents you from demolishing and rebuilding a larger number of units. So this was very clear, and it was basically done so that there was a limitations placed on what could be done on that particular site, and the limitations placed on what a prospective purchaser could do. That was a legal document that when the sale took place, both sides signed up to. And this happened maybe only about 12, 13 years ago. So this is not a covenant that was put in place 100 years ago, which people think those covenants are no longer relevant. This was put in with a very, very clear intent of ensuring that there was no material redevelopment of the land. Now, the successful purchaser, the same people who run the fun fairs in Barham Park, have over the years made numerous attempts to obtain planning permission for that land. They were successful and they have a planning permission in place, but they cannot develop because of the covenant. I can tell you, because I know the feelings on the ground, people feel extremely strongly about this. And should this council, whether it's through the trust or whatever, decide to sell out and get rid of the covenant, there will be a great deal of anger and there will be a great deal of opposition as and when an application is made to the charity to endorse the decision. So this is going to be a long battle and probably a very costly battle. And that's why we think very strongly that it is something that the trust should drop, because it's not doing their image much good, and it will just bog down everything and put aside all the other priorities that the trust should really now be dealing with.
Thank you there, Councillor Lawber. I am going to have to bring your questioning to our pause now.
Introduction and let the officers. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all the speakers for their contributions. I think so. It's good to hear from some of them as well. I have spoken to Carvel and a few others in relation to some of the issues that people are highlighting. I think we do need, first of all, do need to make it clear from the beginning, right, that these are proposals, right, that we're looking at for the long term, and some of the proposals around the strategic property matters are about making sure that we look to maintain and update some of the issues within the building, right, and there are no proposals to take anyone out the building, right? And I'm not entirely sure who said that to you. I've been to the Veterans Club before, and I've seen the work you guys do. I've worked with Carvel, and I've seen the work that she does as well, and. The situation around the Barham Park and the trust and the buildings, we do have to take a look at in making sure that we do look after the buildings, we do maintain them, right? And we everyone keeps on talking about the park and the building being gifted to Brent Council. Yes, it was. Right, but it came with no other sources of funding, right? In order to look after, maintain, and to carry out the functions of what we're looking to do, and we have been quite diligent in the way that we have tried to make sure that the buildings are looked after and maintained. Right, we do have to work with the Charities Commission. There are constraints within the building, right, and we're trying to make sure, right, that we try to achieve the best outcomes going into the future, and because that's one of the requirements of the trust as well. And just to assure everyone that the trust does receive training in regards to its obligations, and Bianca and everybody else can testify to the fact that all of us right, have had the training, and it's quite lengthy as well, right? And yeah, right, everyone is aware of our obligations of what we need to do in order to make sure that as trustees, right, the buildings are looked after, and all the proposals we have are about one, securing the long-term future of the building, and two, to make sure we're fulfilling our obligations as trustees on the trust. But the officers and myself are all ahead to make sure that we respond to the questions. But like I said, these are long-term proposals, right? And the conversations that need to be had will be had with whoever we need to have, and to give the assurances to people here.
Thank you, Councillor. Tanvir?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by sort of addressing the sort of the strategic element of the sort of the call-in. And what I would say is that for officers, it's a fine balancing act with regards to producing a sufficient level of detail to engage interested parties, and not start with a blank canvas, because that would be mismanaging expectations, and equally not having a completely detailed design scheme, because then effectively we're delivering a fait accompli. So with regard to the plans that were presented to Trust Committee last month, there is a sufficient level of detail to be able to engage existing tenants, because there is a re-provision of community space, office space, and retail. The purpose of preparing the report in the way that it was prepared was to then commence the next stage with regards to engaging tenants, because we're regarding tenants on an individual basis, because each of them have leases that are separate to each other. So we cannot categorize them into one group. Following on from that, there is a sufficient level of detail to start engaging the Charity Commission on the art of what's possible with regards to including some level of commercial use to cross-subsidize the community elements. Because every asset that we own, either on trust or as a landlord or as a leaseholder, requires a long-term plan. And that's what this report was prepared for, was to create a long-term plan for Barham Park, because it's been here for many decades, and we'd like it to be here for many more decades to come. So that's what I'd like to say on the strategic report for now. I have other comments on the operational side as well. And what I'd like to say on the operational grounds is starting with the fact that every tenant that's there has their own lease. It's all individually circumstances within which they have certain obligations, and we as a trust, supporting the trust, have certain obligations. And what we're trying to do is to address the decisions previously made by the trust with regards to holding in abeyance certain lease renewals. I think somebody spoke regarding the memory lounge, so we held back on the leasing for that. So it's about re-picking up those issues so they're not left in the past, but actually brought forward and made decisions on to continue the good work that's done by the communities here. So I'm a little bit at unease, I guess is the best word to describe it, with regards to the call-in, because all of this is about is investing in the park and the estate, not now, but for the future through considered engagement. So that's what we're here for.
Okay, thank you, Tanvir. I'm going to go to questions. Councillor Giorgio, straight away.
I mean, I would like to just go back to something that the chair of the Barham Park Trust said regards, you said it was good to hear from the speakers. Why didn't you give the speakers an opportunity to be present at the meeting, which decisions were taken, which were called in just now, 22-minute meeting? Why didn't you allow speakers, public speakers, which is something that the Charity Commission quite clearly states the council trust needs to do? It needs to engage with the public. You're happy to hear from them now. Why weren't you happy to hear from them on the 10th of September?
Okay, thank you very much. You've just heard, right, that we will be consulting and engaging with the.
It's not an answer to the question.
right.
I'm not asking about the future. I'm asking about the issue about the call-in is what
Chair,
happened
I'm
in
going to
the
let
past.
I'm going to let the chair respond
No,
first. Then
well,
I'm going to come
again,
back to
I
you,
will
Councillor
once again state
Giorgio.
that if the chair, in his capacity as chair, just
Councillor
answers what he
Giorgio,
wants to answer,
I will
there's
let
no
the
point
chair
in the
answer
exercise.
first. Then you can follow up.
Thank you very much. As I said, right, we just heard from the officers that the report is about making sure that we go out to consultation and engagement, and the report sets out what we're going to be doing. The officers have set out what we are going to be doing, and we are going to be speaking to the tenants of the building. And you also have to remember this is a long-term plan, and we're starting that process of engagement, communication, and interaction.
I know you have a follow-up.
I mean, we seem to have gotten into a habit of allowing the chair to answer the question he wants to answer. So my question again, why on the 10th of September did you not allow members of the public and current tenants of the buildings to speak at the Barham Park Trust Committee?
As I just said, right, the whole report is about making sure we start the process of engagement.
I think we can move on. If it's the same answer, there's no point hearing it twice.
Let's move on then. Okay.
I think I should be allowed to finish.
No, you're at the scrutiny committee, so we asked the question.
You asked the question, and if you don't like
And you
the
have to answer
that's
it.
not-
Why did you
that's
not allow them to
if you don't-
speak on the 10th of September? Why did you
Councillor
refuse?
Giorgio, we'll either have an answer
It's an
or we'll move
important
on.
point to make. Why did the chair refuse to allow members of the public and current tenants to speak on the 10th of September? I'd like to ask why he refused as chair.
Let's let the chair answer.
As I said, we've just heard from the officers about the report that was presented at the Barham Park Trust meeting. The report sets out the details and the proposals that we have for the building and for the park, and how we're going to be making sure that the investment is put into the buildings, so that the building has a long-term future, and we will be engaging with each tenant on an individual basis, so that we can have those personal conversations to make sure that their issues, their concerns, and their worries are allayed.
Okay, Councillor Mitchell.
Just a point of clarification. Is it the current intention that the library and the other community groups that are currently operating as tenants will be able to continue to operate as tenants from 31? Or is it the intention that this new bronze model is pushing them out and will not let them continue to be tenants?
A report doesn't say anything of that sort. Okay, and what we have said is we want to engage with the tenants and who are in that building, so that we can understand, right, as we come up with proposals, right, what are the barriers, what are the issues with the building, right, how we can improve the building. You heard from the officers, right, that we are taking a look at community spaces and opportunities for those spaces to be used by the community, right, and that does not exclude the current tenants.
So what about the library specifically?
I think the library has a lease until 2031. I think that's, yeah.
So just coming in on that, longer term, the refurbishment plans, redevelopment plans, however you want to call it, will be reflective of the engagement that we've had with the tenants. And is there an intention to keep the current as is in terms of the tenants in those units? That will be dictated through the engagement process, through the engagement with the Charities Commission. So I can't give you an answer in terms of whether the library will be in the same unit in 2032. They may still be within the estate as well as the other community, but maybe in a different part of the estate. That's what will be developed through the process of the work that we want to do.
Mary, any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering sort of what that process will look like. I think at another scrutiny committee with regard to our sort of properties more broadly, we talked about a social value strategy and sort of having some form of sort of system whereby we could identify the value that an asset is having to the community alongside sort of the financial element and how much they're actually willing or able to pay. So I was just wondering if we've given any thought to that, and I guess what I'm hoping to hear from you is a sort of a reassurance and recognition of the value that the library currently provides to residents. Yeah, and that we will consider that moving forwards from 2031 when the lease expires.
Can I come in? I think you're right. We do need to take a look at what value any operator or any tenant brings to to any space, right? So we've just had the launch of the property strategy, which is separate to the trust. So I do need to be clear about that. So the property strategy and its elements about the assets that the council has. The Barham Park Trust and the Barham Park, right, buildings and park, right. We will, as a trust, right, need to have a conversation about what the points you've raised about who is in the building, what value they bring in, what is the value they give into the community, because right, it was a community asset that was left to Brent. So that will be a requirement of the trust to take that into consideration, right, for any leases and tenants that will be in that building going forward.
Okay, Councillor Dixon.
Thank you very much. I keep on knocking it off again as soon as I switched on. Thank you very much. That was really helpful. And I think I'm hearing that generally there will be like a review after you've spoken to the separate tenancies, and that will give you some wriggle room, well, some idea about what they want and whether the new model will help, whether they want to be part of that. I'm quite interested in the next meeting that you say where you'll meet with the public, and just for Councillor Butt as well, will the Cabinet and the councillors also be consulted on this, relevant? So what's the consultation like with the public? What would you envisage that with after you've met the trustees?
I think the starting point will be with the engagement with the existing tenants. They're the priority in terms of who's there and who's most impacted by these proposals. In terms of the public side of it, it will be very much dependent on, for example, if a planning application may be required and what plans we may need to do pre-planning in terms of resident engagement, member engagement. So it all really depends on how far the plans can go and what material impact they'll have from a planning perspective. But I'm certainly not anticipating having sort of wide public meetings without knowing full well how deliverable the bronze option or a variation of the bronze option is within the context of the engagement that we're going to do with the tenants first.
And just to sort of follow on from that, as trustees, we do have an obligation, right, to make sure, right, that we are working within constraints of what the Charity Commission will also allow us to do. So we will always make sure that we're getting the advice, one from the officers and two from the Charities Commission, about what is acceptable and what we also need to do as well going forward.
Can I ask another question related? So you just mentioned the Charity Commission. How confident, how critical is it for the decision to ask the Charity Commission to change some of its terms so that you could consider commercial letting?
I think it is. We do need need to raise the income from the site and from the estate, right? So if you're saying to me, right, that I need to take a look at providing community spaces and provide sort of social value to those community spaces, then that's not going to generate the amount of income that's also needed in order to look after, maintain, and enhance the building, right? So we will need an element of income coming in.
I was going to say, it's part of the reason why the gold and silver options were ruled out, because they are effectively commercial takeovers of the estate, which will require far more investment and far more commercial rents to make the whole investment plan stack up. Whereas the bronze option introduces a smaller amount of commercial in order to act as a cross subsidy to maintain the long-term provision of the charitable purposes.
It's helpful.
Before I go to Councillor Georgie, I want to check one thing with you, Tanvir. You've mentioned about consultation with the existing tenants. Can we find out what the consultation with them will look like? Will that just be with the management of each body in each unit, or will that be with the membership as well, including, say, members of the Veterans Club, users of the Dementia Lounge, friends of Barham Library? Will they be included in that, or will it just be the management here?
I think the starting point will be with the management or the trustees, stroke the individuals that we deal with on a landlord and tenancy basis.
Just want to add, look, I mean, there's nothing stopping the tenants now to have conversations with their members, with their users, right? So that when the conversations take place with the officers, right, they can feed that into it, right? So all the users and members and everything else can be engaged by the tenants now.
Councillor Georgia?
Thank you. One of the decisions taken at the 22-minute meeting, it was to delegate day-to-day trustee functions to the Director of Property and Assets, Tanvir. Chair, can I ask, Chair of the Trust Committee, can I ask, do you have confidence in the information that officers have provided the Trust to date?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that I will say, based on the reports, there are areas within the report that show clear failures by the officers and the information that was provided to yourself as the trust and the decisions you thereafter took. So rents were not collected over a period of time. Service charges, they weren't charged. Rent reviews didn't take place. So when you talk about the need to raise income, and I think throughout the reports, it's very clear, the trust is facing a financial situation that, you know, requires it to maximize the revenue it gets. Why have you, sorry, I'm asking a question, Chair. Okay, because when you ask a question, it's important to engage with the person that's asking the question. My question to you is, why over, and the reports clearly outline the failures, rent, not collecting rents, service charge not being charged, rent reviews not taking place. All of that, had that been done, would have, as you said, raised income, which you plan, which the intention is here. Why was that not done?
I think, Councillor, there is an acknowledgement that all is not perfect at Barham Park. Hence why the decision was to transfer certain delegations over to me, subject to approval. So I think there is an acknowledgement that there is much area for improvement, and that's part of the reason why we're pivoting and not sticking to whatever we've done in the past and let it continue. I'd also like to address your point around rent reviews and service charges, because whilst that may be an interpretation of what was happening in the past, I'd like to hand over to Dennis in terms of where we are in the present.
Yeah, thank you. So officers have been working hard to collect rents. We have actually managed to clear rents prior to October 2023. So the rent arrears that are currently outstanding all pertain to the last 12 months. We do acknowledge that sometimes dialogues with tenants doesn't result in the outcomes that we want in terms of clearing the arrears. And this is why in the report we have stated that we will be using legal processes as well if we need to clear those arrears. So you're absolutely right that the rent collection needs to be efficient, and we are following the pandemic and the height of the pandemic, where a lot of the rents accrued, the arrears accrued. We have been working hard to one, to support tenants because we want to sustain tenancies in the long run, give them an opportunity to recover and clear their debts. So that's the rent side of things. In terms of service charges, we acknowledge that historically they haven't been applied. I'm not sure when that stopped or what the history is, but going forward, we will need to charge them because there are challenges at the estate. We do need to raise income. The building condition, there are challenges with the building condition, and there are repairs needed. And if someone mentioned social value, if we are to support the estate or the trust to continue with delivering its charitable objectives, we do need to get that balance right between income and social value, and that's what the report sets out. So I think, as Tanvir mentioned, we have two distinct reports here. The operational deals with the here and now in terms of what we need to do to deal with some of the issues that have been raised, and also the strategic report, which looks at the long-term sustainability of the estate. And effective estate management requires both operational and strategic performance. You can't have one without the other, and that's why we have produced 2 reports to set those out.
To finish off, right, we also heard, right, from the veterans, right, that they are at the upper limit of what they can afford. Right, and if we need to take a look at sort of increasing the rents, right, we will need to have a conversation, right, with each tenant, right, so that, right, it is made aware to them, right, the implications of what we're trying to do, and the implications of the service charges. Right, it will mean, right, that some individuals and some tenants, right, may face some financial hardship, which probably will add.
Yeah, so the idea is, you know, we won't be implementing them straight away. I think we mentioned April 2025 in the reports, and we want to ensure that they are implemented in a gradual and fair way. We want this to be sustainable. We want tenants to be able to adapt to the changes as well.
Georgia?
So a direct question, if I may, to Tanvir. I think you've acknowledged there have been failures historically. How are you going to change things now that you've got the delegated responsibility to deal with these matters? And then to Denish, if I can, you talk about rent arrears and the desire to clear those rent arrears. 2022-23 financial year, rent arrears of £39,500. The ambition, and this is from the report, the ambition was to clear that by the end of that financial year, which would have been 31st of March 2024. Those arrears have not been cleared as expected. In fact, have grown to 62,000 just this year, this last financial year. What's the reason for that? And you said that you didn't have an understanding as to why service charges weren't being charged previously and why they weren't being collected. Who does know? And can we have an explanation as to why?
So in terms of what's the plan? Effectively, it's a 5-point plan. First one, want to carry out the urgent repairs in the building to maintain its structure, to maintain its warmth, and to make sure it's watertight, and make sure that tenants aren't having to suffer from having to close their services or their buildings to their users. Secondly, it's about the lease position and ensuring every tenant that's currently there is on a valid lease and is compliant with the requirements of that lease. That includes the potential to implement service charges from next year to help fund the maintenance. Alongside that, we have to talk about the restrictive covenant. So that is very much a live topic, and one that I can't say too much on, other than there is a value to the trust for removing that covenant. And I appreciate there is a long history and a past here, but it cannot be unsaid that there is a value to the trust for removing that covenant. Alongside that, we've got to engage with the tenants, we've got to engage with the Charity Commission with regards to the longer term plan. And that's subject to what happens with this call-in, I would like to crack on with.
So Councillor Georgie, I really appreciate your concerns about the rent and the concerning trends. So just to clarify, the rents did go up, partly because we did some rent reviews, I think in 2023 or early this year, I think, if memory serves, and that increased the rent because of those backdated rent reviews. And I think
That's the rent arrears you're talking about?
yes,
Right, okay.
yeah. So the rent reviews were backdated. So if you may recall, some of the tenants hadn't had rent reviews for quite a number of years. So that was actually added onto the arrears. So that's where that increase in trend was. So I can confirm that as of Q2, the rents are now at 40,000. So we have made significant progress with tenants to actually reduce that rent. If the recommendations in the report are approved, we'll have further means to actually bring that down. But we want to clear debts in an ethical and supportive way. We want to sustain tenancies, and sometimes they do take a long time to clear. Regarding your second question about service charges, I think, as we've stated in the report itself, our understanding, I can't talk about what happened, decades ago, but from officers that have worked for the council for a number of years, my understanding, our understanding is that service charges haven't been applied, and for the very reason that has been mentioned before around balancing income and social value, that we do the trust wanted to support charitable organisations and keep rents affordable. But of course, times change. Costs are going up, and that change needs to happen.
Any further ones? For
Well, if any member of the committee wants to go.
one
Okay,
quick
fine.
file, go on. I think you've got
Okay,
one.
so Tanvir, you mentioned the covenant. Do you know how much it will cost to lift the covenant?
So the only cost of lifting the covenant, as far as I understand, will be officer time, so legal time in actually preparing any sort of deed that is required. There may also be, we do need to get an updated valuation, which we need to continue with negotiations, and officer time in obtaining any approvals as well.
Okay, Councillor Butt.
Thank you very much, Chair. A lot of my questions were actually asked in the last flurry in regards to sort of service charges and the rent that's received. I've just got a sort of query stroke question. Obviously, the cost to maintain the park and cost to maintain anything has been increasing year on year, cost of living. But as far as I can recall, the last 6 years, the income for Barham Park has sort of been stagnant at around the 100,000 mark, plus or minus a few thousand. And then obviously you've got the restrictive funds and whatever have you. And I recall the windows, a quote that Leslie managed to get for us, and I think it was something like £400,000 for all the windows to be replaced because they had to be replaced with a specific style. Now, obviously, the cost to maintain such a building is increasing. The rents that we're getting are what you must probably call peppercorn rents. They're not exactly market rents, but the services that we've been providing as a council to the trust only actually started being charged from when the trust was actually created. Is that correct? Because the land was bequeathed, I think it was in 1938, something like that, and the 70s.
I have to admit, I'm struggling to understand the question there.
No, so what I'm trying to figure out is the council, for a period of time, managed the park without a trust being present, without a trust being created. Was that the case when the houses were built?
I don't think it was so much that there wasn't a trust, it was that the park was managed alongside all the council's other parks, and there came a certain point in time when a separate arrangement for managing it was set up and the trust was more formally recognised. I think that's probably what you're referring to.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to understand here was prior to that time when it was managed as the council, were there rents received?
Probably too long ago for anyone here to answer, but if
Yeah.
something was rented out, I imagine rent was received, but it would have been.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to get at here is the building is used as a product to manage the park to a degree as well. The £100,000 that it generates, it's all the rental that is received goes to the trust. What are the future plans for the rental side of things? So if, regardless of whether the tenants stay or don't stay, are we likely to have market rent, affordable rent for the if everything that's within the report is obtained, i.e. if the covenant is obtained, if you get the delegated powers, if you get all the back payments and the service charges, what's our ultimate goal here for the community benefit?
I think the ultimate goal for the community benefit is to make sure that the estate is sustainable and it's got good quality accommodation for the tenants that are going to be at that point in time. Some of them will be delivering community services, some of them may be doing commercial and retail, subject to what we get by way of the charity commission response. So I think the ultimate goal is to make sure the estate can be self-sufficient and doesn't require funding from other sources to run the operation as a sustainable venture.
Can I just come in there? Right, look, look, at the moment, okay, right, we had three options in the proposals, right, gold, silver, and bronze, right. If we had said and suggested, right, that the gold option was going to be the best option, that would mean, right, that we would need to take a look at open market rents and make the building commercial. Okay, but that doesn't fit in with the requirements of what we are as a trust, right? And that's why we need to have a conversation with the Charities Commission about having an element, right, in the new proposals going forward, right, about having some commercial, right, and also then taking a look at the future. Because look, if we're going to be investing in $1 million, 2 million, 3 million, it doesn't matter how much money we invest in the building, right? In order to justify that expenditure, right, we also need to repay back that money that we will be looking to borrow. Okay, and when we borrow that money, right, we need to have a repayment plan with it as well. It's like anything else we do in the council, right? Any capital projects, right, need to have an element of that revenue element, so you can repay some of that back, right? So we will absolutely need some of that commercial element in order to repay back some of the money that we will be investing. Right, so it depends on absolutely, right, one, right, the conversations we have with the tenants, right, what the tenants are looking for, and we also need to be clear about what we will be looking for as a trust, right, from the building as well, so that it does actually wash its face as well, right? So asking us to say whether or not it's going to be commercially viable or it's going to be community focused and everything else, right? At the moment, right, we can't give you that answer because obviously we've just started that process of start that engagement and understanding, and then the plans will need to be firmed up, right, in order to get to a place, right, so that we can give you the final costings of what it will mean for one, for the trust, and for two, for the community and the tenants.
Yeah, because what I'm trying to get at there is what was bequeathed was for the recreation and leisure benefits, and I believe it was park. But currently, the building is not being utilised by, or all of the residents of the borough can't go and utilise that building. So what I'm trying to get at here is that the building is a means to an end. The building helps take care of the park, takes its income and looks after the park. But currently, it just seems very, very restrictive for the trust, for the borough, for anyone to do anything meaningful. And that's coming from myself. Even when I was a councillor, there was one of the windows that was deteriorating away, and I think a couple of the officers had to get them involved just to patch it up. But it's yeah, that's all it was, just to establish and understand whether charging minimal rent is actually beneficial for the trust, or whether moving to a different model, which is what's being explored, is better.
Oh, quick comment then.
It is a comment because we've just heard from members of the public who make good use of that space, and the fact that Councillor Butt, you're implying that it's not well used, it's not. Well, that's what it came across like.
I
So
do
I do think
apologise.
we've
That
heard
wasn't
from
what you were
members of the
saying.
public. Who,
Yeah, no, I do apologise. That's not what I meant. Is currently in the park, anyone can, walk into the park at any moment in time to any part of the park. But with the library, a carver, Tamil Samaj, or veterans, you'd have to be a member of that exclusive club, or be a member of the library, or be.
It's not true. The library, as an example, is open to all members of the community at all times.
Yeah.
I'm going to let the
And
chair
that doesn't
come in. I'm
apply
going
to
to
the
the chair
rest,
of the
yeah.
trustees come in now.
Thank you. I think when the park was bequeathed, right, it's to community use, okay, right? So it means all of the communities. So I understand where you're going, right? So if it's Akava, right, who are using that building, right, and they're renting out that space, right? So it's only being used by Akava and the individuals who they've leased that building to. So if anybody else wanted to come in and use a space, right, they wouldn't be able to use it. Right, so if it's the memory lounge or whoever it is, right, they're the ones who'd be using that building. So right, I think what we can do, I think there is, as Councillor Georgia pointed out, the library is open to everyone, isn't it? Right, when it's open, in order to use that. Right, so I think the wider point is, right, how do we make the space more accessible, right, to everyone as such? Okay, yeah, that's a consideration we can take.
Okay, Councillor Long and then Councillor Mitchell.
When we consult with people, are we going to be consulting with the people who literally aren't interested in the park because I don't think it offers anything to them? Like we were told what facilities there were when Councillor Lorber was here, but there's no mugger, for instance. There's only a play area and a gym. So we've got the people who use the facilities in the buildings being consulted, but what about those who just think the park isn't for them? And it's very 19th century now. So what are we going to do to make the park 21st century? Have we consulted on that? Because we do seem to be stuck in a rut.
Is it okay? Yeah. Whatever you put into the park, right, will have a revenue element to it as well, or expenses to it as well. Right. So by putting more onto it, until we actually know what we have coming in, or what the scope of what we're looking to do, right, in the park, right, adding more things in is just going to make the whole thing probably more not viable.
I was just going to add, in terms of the issues that we're facing in the here and now are very much around the estate, the buildings,
Yeah.
and the tenants and the units. So that's part of the reason why the lead officer role is being suggested to transfer to me, is because that's where the priority issues are right now.
Councillor Mitchell. Oh, Long's got a quick follow-up.
Well, I haven't finished because we've got an estate there that was bequeathed to Wembley Council. Then Titus Barham died and his widow moved away. The house went into disrepair. So the house they actually lived in isn't even there because it was knocked down because it was too derelict. So everything seems to be following on that side of things. But are the buildings themselves actually worth saving, or are they just a millstone round the council's neck?
I think, honestly speaking, it's not my favorite project. But by the same token, we can't sleepwalk into the future and not address the here and now, which is the operational estate matters, any leases that need renewing, any of the sort of the landlord role that we need to do to uphold our responsibilities to the trust. So hopefully that sort of answers your question. It's challenging, but that's what we're here for.
So I'd like to respectfully disagree with my boss, actually, but from what I've heard today, and the passion from various organisations and the use of the building, I think it's a really important estate, and it's really important that we sustain it for current and future generations as well. And actually, going back to Councillor Long's point about opening up the building to to the wider community is also important. And part of this request to the Charity Commission to expand the uses is so that we can have a broader use, which may actually bring in, more of the public to actually appreciate and enjoy the building and the park as well.
Daniel, I'm not too far away from where Janice sort of started off from, because I've been to the building and I've seen the state of the building as well, and I've also seen the many rooms and the spaces and at the moment, right, honestly, I don't really think it's fit for purpose as such, or fit for going forward as well. Right, we want to make sure, right, that the spaces that are there are used efficiently and well. Okay, right, but in order to do that, right, to make sure, right, that it is energy efficient, right, the heating works, the roof doesn't leak, right, and everything else, right, it will need a level of investment, right, and as Councillor George has said, we've heard from people who are enjoying the building, right, in order for that enjoyment to continue, right. Right, so sometimes you have to do work. It's no different, right, to your own home, right. If if you don't do the work, right, it becomes more expensive, right. And what we're trying to do now is absolutely start the conversation about what we need to do. Right? There are some works that are in the pipeline, in train, but we also need to take a look at the future as well, right. It's no different, right, to any of us, right. I mean, all households do grow. Right, and we want Barham Park to grow as well, and we want as many people as possible to enjoy that space. But in order for that to happen, we do need to make some of that investment, and we do need to make the plans, and that's all we're doing with these reports.
Councillor Mary Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to offer a comment and then a set of questions. I think my comment on Councillor Long's points, I think our starting point of sort of, is this a millstone around the council's neck, I think is fundamentally not a helpful position, because I think ultimately we are in a public funding crisis. There is an absolute dearth of facilities that communities can use across the borough. And I think this is an opportunity, and again, this actually is to Councillor Long's point on, are we consulting the other parts of our communities in addition to those that already use the services? I think there's an opportunity to think, actually, what are the needs as a borough? Like, where are our biggest needs? What is our overall strategy? I think if we can consider this in the context of the property strategy, I think that's also helpful. Because I think ultimately this is a community asset that should be still serving a lot of our communities. So let's sort of take it from that basis of sort of what's the need, what's the social value that this can provide. And then my questions, what I'm struggling with a little bit is the sort of the financial risk and the financial investment that's involved. And I'm wondering if you can just talk me through this decision-making process so far, because it seems like the council spent sort of £20,000 or thereabouts on this sort of architectural appraisal in 23, and there's a question mark around that as well, because it seems like the council was going to pay it, and then actually the trust had to pay it. So they invested £20,000 in 23 for some plans that were not going to be delivered until 2031. There's also a business case that still hasn't been developed, and I note that that is due to be developed. So what was the rationale behind investing some money sort of a long way ahead of 2031, not having done the business modelling in the first place? And yeah, I'm just wondering, and with still quite a sizable amount of risk attached in terms of whether the what's the word, like the covenant will be able to be changed in order to make the bronze option feasible anyway. So I'm just wondering if you could sort of reassure us of that, the timeline, the risk. And I think my other question that's attached to that is, at the moment it says the council will be funding this bronze option. From what funding pot is the council going to be funding that? Is that a sensible decision for the council financially in terms of the risk?
So in terms of the work that was done by the architects, that was to help us articulate the art of what's possible across 3 different options: gold, silver, and bronze. So we've got something tangible to work to and be able to share and secure engagement on. In terms of the investment plan, we've got a sufficient level of detail to understand ballpark costs, but I cannot be frivolous with trust money and bring on board quantity surveyors, cost consultants, when we've got quite sort of conceptual architectural plans, because we didn't want to invest so much in a plan that will change through the course of engagement and other things that may come online. So we have a sufficient level of detail today to be say, on the bronze option, based on current market conditions and what we know, we're looking at circa £1.7 million worth of investment required. That predominantly is based on a capital borrowing, but that's not to say we can't look at other grant opportunities or look at strategic seal funding further down the line. But we can't develop that business case now because the design isn't fixed. And I would be misinforming trust to say, trust me on this business case today, because it will stand the test of time in 7 years' time. It won't. Things will change. So we have to create a sufficient level of detail and work out how we get to the final design to then work out how much is actually going to cost based on a fixed design proposal. So that's kind of, hopefully that gives you enough assurance that we've done enough work to be able to commence the next stage, but we're not committing to an investment plan or a business case yet because there's so much more unknowns to work through.
Yeah.
I just want to add that when you consider the value of the estate, the costs are actually very proportionate, and actually they are a necessity to give us insights, to give officers insights and the trust committee insights into what, as Tanvir has mentioned, what is actually possible and what the constraints are and what the challenges are. So they are a necessity, you know, when you are strategically planning.
One sort of final reflection on that trail of thought in terms of these options. I note that in the report under the climate change or sustainability sort of implications, it says none, which is a very common recurring theme. And I'm wondering if that is true or if in fact climate change was considered through things like the cost of insulation as an opportunity to think about retrofit. Have we thought about energy sources? Have we thought about the different architectural options in terms of embodied carbon? Has that at all been considered? Are there in fact climate change considerations that could have been added?
I think the no statement, as in the here and now, is predominantly based on the level of design that we've got. So we haven't really invested in what sort of materials and features we're going to be able to incorporate as part of the fixed design process. And that will dictate what opportunities there will be in terms of retrofit, carbon emissions, net zero. But although things are expensive, so we have to tread a fine line in terms of what climate change mitigations we can put in as part of the longer term investment plan. But we've got to find the most sort of value for money options, and notwithstanding that the design isn't fixed yet. So I think that's probably why it's a no right now, but that's not to say it's full stop.
Tanvir, when would you be expecting to have an idea as to what those plans would look like after obviously you've engaged with the public, you've engaged with the tenants? When roughly would you expect to have a better, more concrete idea as to what those plans would look like as you just outlined?
If we're talking ideals, because you can't predict too much in the world right now, we'd be looking to bring something back to the trust committee next year. And with regards to those plans and what the engagement has told us, we would look to engage on what level of funding would be required to then kick off the next design stage, to then procure the relevant design team and bring on board whoever we need to bring on board to then develop those plans.
Okay, and looking ahead to the Charity Commission and putting these plans forwards, and obviously you're doing these assessments now, how confident are you that the Charity Commission will say yes to this? And if they don't, what is the backup plan, really?
I think what I would say around the Charity Commission is that it's an independent organization. So the degree of influence that we have is stymied. But the proposal that we put forward is very much around upholding the charitable purposes of the estate. and not necessarily bringing in, you know, all kinds of commercial operators to completely change the face of what's there currently. So we think we're going to put a compelling case, but ultimately it's not in our domain to decide one way or the other.
Councillor Dixon, is that you first, and then
No, you asked. what I was
Oh.
gonna ask.
Councillor Ahmadi?
My question is unrelated to yours and the last few, so if anyone else has anything to say first. No? All right. I see some of the members of our gallery leaving, and because I myself am not definitely clear on this, I would like it to be clarified. If there is, as it stands, a commitment to engage with the present tenants and others potentially, actively and keep them informed between now and the next meeting, because the commitment for the next meeting that's a year away. So it's not very tangible for the tenants and their anxieties. So is there a commitment to actively engage with the present tenants?
We are going to start the process of that engagement with the tenants, right? So every tenant and every individual, right, will be contacted by the officers, right, to make sure, right, one, we explain to them what's happening, what the process is, what the report sets out, and then the officers, right, will start that engagement process with them, right, and they will have the opportunity, right, to reach out to the officers anytime they want, as well.
But before the next meeting, right? No, we're not going to wait until.
Yeah, that's what the report does. It starts. It gives the the trust has given the permission for the officers to start that process.
The main reason why we've not started that process is because this decision has been called in. So we're waiting to see the outcome of what happens here to then work out what the next steps are.
So we have actually set out the timescales in the report, and we've also made sure that there is ample time for that consultation. So we're not just going to do one single conversation and that's it. We do want a dialogue with tenants as well. There are some urgent things that we need to do, which has been set out in the operational report in terms of the repairs, the lease renewals, reactivating Unit 7, for example. So they are urgent as well, but absolutely there is a commitment to engage with tenants and allow them to input into the final designs.
Thank you. That should be of some comfort to any of them who are still listening.
Okay, can I see any further hands for questions? No. So, sorry, didn't see you.
The Sure Start issue, we were told earlier on that there's money that is laid aside for a Sure Start. What would happen if we had to hand that back? What is the impact on the council finances?
So I hopefully can answer that. So I appreciate that in previous reports, this risk around the clawback of the grant has been highlighted, but the Sure Start grant relates to Brent Council as the tenant and not directly to the trust. So should the trust decide not to renew the council's lease for Unit 8 in 2031, then the council as tenant will be responsible for addressing any clawback provisions under that funding arrangement. I think in the January 2022 report, we had actually set out the figure of roughly 93k. That will be reduced now, and by the time we get to 2031, that will be a much reduced figure as well. But just to highlight that, this would need to be an arm's length decision, whatever decision is made about Unit 8, and the council will need to deal with its own grant issues, basically.
Okay, Councillor Giorgio.
I think one thing we failed to mention tonight is Unit 7. What's going on with Unit 7?
Yeah, so Unit 7 has been mentioned in the report. We want to reactivate it. We've set out that we will initially discuss a potential leasing arrangement with the Friends of Barham Library, who won the tender. I think it was in 2018. So that's all. We're very keen to bring that unit back into use, and we've heard from the Memory Lounge as well today about their concerns. So that's going to be an absolute priority if this is approved.
For those watching and for those in the public gallery, Unit 7 was intended for dementia advice and an outreach service. And heads of terms were negotiated as far back, I believe, as 2018. So there have been 6 wasted years where potential users of that service have been deprived of that service. What's the reason for that?
The main reason for that delay was so that we could get the strategic plan in place to better understand what is the art of the possible with regard to the long-term vision for the estate. And now we've established that, we can now have meaningful conversations with Friends of Barham Library in partnership with the Memory Lounge with regards to the letting of Unit 7 and effectively placing that piece of the puzzle within the wider context of the strategic plan. So it's unfortunate that that time has passed, but ultimately we needed that longer term plan in place to better place how we then let Unit 7. So whilst the past is the past, I don't think this is the place to necessarily use that to paralyze the present and prevent any future letting of Unit 7.
Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, so one thing that the call-in references, which we haven't yet discussed, is also governance model. And I think we've discussed sort of some of the challenges and perhaps failings in terms of facilities management and sort of ways in which could have been done better. And the model that has been chosen is moving forward with a delegated authority for you, Tanvir. And what the call-in is recommending instead of that is having new trustees who were better able to sort of manage the facilities part of the puzzle. Why do we think that delegating authority to you and having you in charge rather than having new trustees is a preferred model?
You want to come in?
I was going to say that the Trust has regularly each year had a review of its governance arrangements, which have looked at the current arrangements. And on each occasion, it's been decided that the current structure of a subcommittee of the Cabinet and then delegation to officers in relation to operational matters is the right one. So it does get looked at regularly, and that will happen again because it's a regular topic for the Trust.
Just to follow on for that, I can assure you, right, honestly, right, the conversations we have about the model of managing, right, it comes up as Deborah said every year, right, but even during the course of the year, I still ask questions about what other types of models are there. I'm always looking around all over the country, right, to see who else has done something different. And honestly, to this day, right, we've struggled to find anything sort of that will be different or better.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Okay, with that, I think we'll thank the officers and thank the chair for their time tonight, answering the questions, and legal as well for their advice. I'm going to move on to a decision and remind committee members that we have 2 options available. The first option will be whether we send back the reports, item 7, strategic property review, and item 8, operational report property matters. Or alternatively, you can vote against sending any recommendations back. But what I will ask is that all members explain why they are voting to send the recommendations back tonight. So I'm going to bring that to a vote, and I'm going to ask, do any members feel that we need to send item 7, the strategic property review, back to Cabinet to be reviewed? Show of hands. Okay. And those against? That's not sending it back. And any abstentions? Okay. And item 8, operational property matters. Do any members wish to send the report back at this time to Cabinet? Okay. And those against? And those abstaining? Okay. Councillor June, I think we need some reasons. Okay, no, that's fine.
happy
I'll
to
let you,
explain.
but yeah, I'll let you explain.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I don't think that the issues raised, the 8 issues that the call-in is based on, have been sufficiently addressed by officers and by the chair. I think there have been a litany of failures by the trust to deal with various issues. If I only mention a few, the collection of rent, the non-charging of service charges, Unit 7, there are still questions around that and why it's taken so long. I just think that the trust, we need to have more time to, first of all, engage with the public at this stage as well, which the trust has failed to do. And I have no confidence that the trust is doing what it needs to do. And I don't think that the trust is receiving good advice from officers either.
Okay, thank you very much, councillor. Therefore, I can say that we as a committee have voted not to send these decisions back to Cabinet. I want to thank everyone once again for their time, and I bring this meeting to a close. Thank you.